Going into the weekend, the Seahawks still had slim playoff hopes, but that is no longer the case as they've been eliminated from postseason contention. What went wrong and how was the West lost? We're going to be breaking it all down here on Elimination Monday on Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in, whether you're in nearby Bellevue, Washington, or down in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Unfortunately, we wish we were still looking at Seahawks playoff scenarios, but there are no longer any such scenarios. Seattle eliminated last night with the Commanders beating the Falcons in overtime. That officially made it impossible for the Seahawks to win the NFC West with the strength of victory tiebreaker, even if they beat the Rams in Week 18. So even though there's one game left to play, it is on to the offseason. There will be no extra January football for Mike Macdonald's squad. And there's a lot of reasons that we can look back and say this is why this team didn't quite get over the hump to make the playoffs. They made the move to go from Pete Carroll to Mike Macdonald, looking to get out of mediocrity. But in year one, Rob, that did not happen, at least in the sense that they were unable to make the playoffs. And there's a lot of different reasons that we can point out here. But I think that you have to start this conversation with the fact that this offense never quite played to the level that we expected with Ryan Grubb as the offensive coordinator. They had one of the worst rushing attacks in the NFL. At times, it seemed like they didn't think they needed to try to run the football. Geno Smith was impacted by really poor offensive line play. He had his mistakes in the red zone. There were schematic issues. It didn't necessarily seem that Macdonald, what he wanted to do, lined up with Ryan Grubb. We'll see what happens on that front coming out of this season if Grubb is back for a second year. But it seemed like the offense maybe was the biggest problem this year in terms of on the field that kept this team from being able to get those extra couple wins they needed to win the NFC West and get to the playoffs.
Oh, no question about it, Corbin. I think that, we saw gradual improvement on the defensive side of the ball. You didn't see that with the offense. And so whether you're going to pin the blame on the play caller in Ryan Grubb, on the dearth of talent along the line of scrimmage, I would argue it pass catcher also was a huge area of concern for this club, considering that the Seahawks allocated the fourth most dollars to their wide receiver core and got 12 total touchdowns. So I do think that there is plenty of blame to be spread around on the offensive side of the ball. I also think just the fact that, as you mentioned, this is a team that was going through a significant transition from Pete Carroll, of course, the most experienced head coach in the league, to the least experienced, at least among them, when it came to Mike Macdonald. There was 8 coaches that were hired for the 2024 season, Corbin. 6 of them are not going to be in the playoffs, Mike Macdonald being one of them. The 2 that hired head coaches that are now going to be in the playoffs, Dan Quinn with the Washington Commanders and Jim Harbaugh with the Los Angeles Chargers. Of course, both of them had a great deal of success as NFL head coaches previously. So I think that we can, really get down to the nitty-gritty as far as why the Seahawks wound up finishing out of the playoffs in an NFC West division that was as competitive as any in all of the NFL. But I think we also just have to kind of start with the conversation that, again, there's an awful lot of transition going from Pete Carroll to Mike Macdonald, and that transition, I think that people had to expect that there was going to be some bumps along the road to the postseason.
Yeah, and I think that it would be remiss for us not to mention the fact that the Seahawks went 3-6 at home. Look, you cannot expect, they already made history. There had never been a team that finished 3-6 or only had 3 wins at home that had finished with 9 wins and a winning record in regular season. That had never happened. Not necessarily something that you want to have on your resume, especially with a stadium with the reputation that Lumen Field has. And listen, I know there were games where the road fans showed up and they were loud, but listen, those people are going to be drowned out if you're playing better football at home. And they just were night and day in terms of performance at home this year. They lost 6 of their 7 games to this point, playing on their own turf in front of their own fans. And one of those games of the New York Giants, I mean, if you're looking at a game that lost this playoff opportunity, that is the game. And they were missing Malik Neighbors, their best player in that game. The New York Giants were one of the worst teams in the NFL, and they did win this past weekend, but they hadn't won since the Seattle game. So you're looking at one of the worst teams in the NFL coming into your building and putting up 29 points. That's inexcusable. That is the game that everybody can look back to and say that never should have been lost. You never should have lost to the Giants, especially on your own home turf. But the fact that they lost 6 out of 9 games in one of these seasons with the 17-game schedule, it alternates. Next year, they're going to play 9 games on the road, but you had a chance to play an extra game at home, and you won 3 of those games with the talent that this football team has. That clearly was a big factor in Seattle not being able to get it done and get to the postseason this year.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you mentioned Seattle's home record and the fact that this was a crowd that was, universally known as one of the fiercest, one of the most intimidating in all of the NFL. And it became kind of a, 12s, but kind of a powder puff, kind of a crowd that over the last couple of years, where it seems like there is an awful lot of season ticket holders who are just selling their tickets to the highest bidder. And a lot of times those highest bidders are, of course, fans for the opposing football team. And I think that on the one hand, you can blame the fans. On the other hand, I think that you got to blame the team. I mean, they are the ones that, of course, are putting the product on the field. And the fact that Seattle was as slow in their starts as they were for much of this season, Corbin, I mean, other than a Rayshon Jenkins 102-yard fumble return, I mean, there was not very many fireworks going off in the first quarter of Seahawks home games. And so I think that there's this is the Seattle crowd that, maybe it got a little bit spoiled with all the success that the Seahawks had, especially at home. And now that Seattle was struggling as much as they did this past season, I think that, again, the home crowd, instead of those cheers, they turned to jeers and just disappointment at times. And so I do think that it did play a significant factor in this, and why that, again, for the longtime Seahawks fans out there, the ones who perhaps were a little bit more realistic, would acknowledge that this was a team that, again, it's talking about a 10-win season here in a head coach's very first season in town. That is a significant accomplishment, and one that I think that should not be just kind of ignored. But I also think that when you have the talent, as you said, that the Seahawks have, especially at the skill position, then you really were expecting there to be an awful lot of fireworks, an awful lot of home victories that would have propelled this team into the playoffs.
The slow starts, that might have been ultimately the thing that undid this football team, because especially down the stretch, look at the last 2 home games. They fell behind 14-0 to the Green Bay Packers. You lose your quarterback in the second half. There's no way you can make the comeback because of that deficit. The defense had been playing so well, and they let the Packers just march right down the field on them twice and score touchdowns. They didn't sound like they were prepared for that game. And then the next week, they give up a touchdown to Minnesota early. Now, they only were down 7-0, but again, it was a game that did not go in their favor in terms of starting off fast. And then the Bears game, it was a slow start and it was a slow finish. I mean, nobody could move the football or put points on the board in that game. So I think that at the end of the day, that was as big of an issue for this team. That was a chronic problem at Lumen Field, as you mentioned. So you can put those two directly together. They correlate. You won 3 out of 9 home games in large part because you stunk in the first quarter on offense, defense, and special teams. All 3 phases were impacted by that. So you can look at the coaching from that front, what went wrong. They got out to faster starts when they weren't playing at home. That's something that Mike McDonald is going to have to look at very closely this offseason and try to figure out what can I do to curb this issue, because next year you cannot afford to be that flat start off games, especially at home. You got to find ways to get that home field advantage back if you want to get back to the top of the NFC West. But as it stands, that's not going to happen this year. No playoffs for the Seahawks. As we'll talk later in the show, that doesn't mean that week 18 is completely meaningless, though. We'll be discussing that later in the show. We got a Monday mailbag coming up next. We're going to be tackling your questions off X and Blue Sky. That's coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That has definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions I didn't even realize I was still paying for. And Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features of the subscription tracker, I've used it to cancel services that I'm not using anymore, and I've already saved a ton of money. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. You're listening to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. It's your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. It's time to open up the mailbag. And yes, there's going to be plenty of questions about the future of this franchise now that the Seahawks know they will not be participating in the postseason in 2024. Let's get to our first question, coming from I'm the Little Bro 1 on X. Out of Boy Mafe, Derek Hall, Reek Woolen, Devin Witherspoon, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Kobe Bryant. Who is worth paying long term? So Tyrese Knight was included in this question as well, but he's just in his rookie season. These are all players that I just mentioned that have 1 or 2 years left on their rookie contracts. I would think there's 1 or 2 names there that stand out the most that need to be extended, but there are a lot of difficult decisions the Seahawks are going to have to make on that front on who's going to be on this team for a second contract moving forward.
Yeah, for me, the easy answer there is Devin Witherspoon. Now, I say easy answer because I think of what he brings to the field in terms of his playmaking ability, in terms of just the charisma, the leadership. The caveat, of course, is that he's still 5'11", 180 pounds. And the way that he plays, you always worry that he is going to be the kind of guy that is going to struggle with injuries. But I think that he is the easy one. I'd like to see Boye Mafe take his game to a whole other level. Of course, he's one of the elder statesmen of that list, has another year in the NFL, more than Derek Hall. I think those are two prize pass rushers that Seattle has got to take care of and got to extend them, just because I do think that they are 2 future top 10 plus sack kind of guys. Tariq Woolen to me is a little bit more up and down. Kobe Bryant has shown flashes as well. But again, the order I just said those names, Witherspoon, Mafe, Hall, JSN I would throw in there, but of course he's got another couple of years before you have to worry about him as well. But Woolen to me is the one who I want to extend, but I need a little bit more proof that he wants to be in Seattle playing at an elite level to justify the dollars he's going to command.
Next question from Malian McCool on X. I'd like your opinions on Ryan Grubb. What did you see that you liked, what you didn't like, and does he have an NFL future? As far as what I liked, Rob, when the Seahawks actually committed to running the football at times late this season, you did see some of the creativity from a schematic standpoint that was missing earlier in the season. The Cardinals game is the one that jumps out to me, at least for a half, but that leads into the other issue. And this is my biggest problem with what I've seen from Ryan Grubb, the inability or unwillingness to adapt. And whether that is just in general with his philosophy or in the middle of the game, how many times do we see this year where the Seahawks found something that was starting to work and then the defense made adjustments and then they kept trying to do the same thing? It's almost like you're hitting your head against a wall and you're not able to make leeway. And this is a team that had that issue on offense for the entire season. And I saw it in the run game. I saw it in the pass concepts, the red zone with guys squeezed together. It just didn't seem like he adjusted well from the college game to the NFL. And that doesn't mean that he couldn't make those adjustments this offseason, but I'm going to be honest. I'm more colored on the skeptical side of things right now that he's going to be able to do that, because I haven't seen anything leading up to this point that suggests to me that he's going to be able to do that, because I have seen a coordinator that continues to make a lot of the same mistakes and lack the adjustments that are needed against NFL defenses. And he's tried to do things the way he did them at Washington, and it just has not worked. So as far as the NFL future, I can see Mike Macdonald bringing him back, but I do wonder about there being philosophical differences that are going to lead to a split there, and that a new offensive coordinator is going to be coming in year 2 of Mike Macdonald. We will find that out here in coming weeks, but certainly there are questions about the viability of Ryan Grubb at this point as an NFL offensive coordinator. Next question from Jaspreet Singh on X. Rob, you are going to love this one. Now that the New England Patriots have the number 1 overall pick, is there a possibility the Seahawks come up with a package and mortgage their future to trade up for the number 1 pick and draft their franchise quarterback of the future in Shedeur Sanders?
There's very few things in the sporting world, Corbin, that would shock me more than if the Seahawks were to package several draft picks. Because, of course, we're talking about Seattle being probably, 15 to 18 or so. Right now, I believe I saw a mock draft that had them selecting 18th overall as of today, December 30th. So, again, you're talking about 3, 4, 5 years worth of very early selections to move up for Shedeur Sanders, a quarterback who at least is my top-rated quarterback in this draft class. There's an awful lot of debate about that. Perhaps former Washington State star, now Miami Hurricane star Cam Ward, Heisman Trophy finalist, is also getting some play as the number 1 quarterback. Corbin, I don't think either one of them are worthy of a first-round selection. Certainly not a bold move up like that. I think the New England Patriots or the New York Giants or the Las Vegas Raiders, whoever is going to be drafting number 1, number 2, number 3 overall, they would be crazy if they don't take some of the elite defensive players, maybe the Heisman Trophy winner himself, Travis Hunter, at number 1 over a quarterback class that is completely lacking in comparison to the crops that we've seen the last couple of years.
Saint Nick, we saw Mike Macdonald take drastic, ruthless steps to revamp the linebacker position during the season. Could we see some equally drastic roster moves during the offseason? And if so, where? There's one position that I could see potentially this happening, and I'm not predicting that this is going to be the case, but this might catch some people off guard. But I'm going to say running back. That is the position that I could see some drastic moves being made, because I do think there are some questions within the organization about Ken Walker III's ability to stay healthy. There are certainly some questions now mounting about his durability. And I think there's also some questions, especially if you're going to bring Ryan Grubb back. If Ryan Grubb's going to be here next year, you watch the tape, and yes, the offensive line was a big part of the problem. There's no question about it. But Ken Walker III's running style did not seem to mesh with what Ryan Grubb wanted to do in the run game. Charbonnet looked to be a better fit. Is that a position that you decide to see, hey, is there a way we can get a day 3 pick for Ken Walker III before he leaves in free agency? We're not going to extend him in this instance. And then maybe Mike Macdonald makes a move to go bring in more of a battering ram style running back that is going to fit what he wants to do coming from Baltimore. Or maybe they draft one earlier than expected. I know that's not what fans want to hear, but that position and receiver would be another one that I could see some dramatic changes coming. I mean, Tyler Lockett, we don't know what his future holds. DK Metcalf, is he potentially going to be on the market? But I would say running back and receiver are the 2 positions that I could see some drastic measures being taken that have talented players but didn't live up to that talent this year as expected. The cat in the hat on Blue Sky. Do you think there's any chance that players like Geno, K9, and DK having statistically down seasons might make their price tags more manageable for extensions and maybe end up being a net positive to make a push in the playoffs the next couple of years?
Well, I think that Geno Smith already proved that he was willing to do that. And John Schneider thanked him, during the press conference when Geno Smith, inked his extension a couple of years ago. That said, I don't know that Geno Smith would do that now. I don't know that Ken Walker or that DK Metcalf or frankly many other players would do that. I think that just shows some of the intangibles that are so appealing about Geno Smith, but also are so rare. Frankly, I think that this is a league where you're going to see an awful lot of players who are going to try to get as much money as they possibly can, and the easiest way to do that is to pad their statistics. And for all the reasons that you just talked about a moment ago, Corbin, with Ryan Grubb and his struggles in his first season as an NFL play caller, frankly, everybody's numbers are down. So there's going to be an awful lot of, I think, griping behind closed doors about, hey, my production is down. That's dropping my bottom line in terms of my pay. So I don't know that anybody would be willing to come to Seattle and take a discount, whether it be a hometown discount or just the opportunity to play in the beautiful area that is Seattle, just because. I think that you have to be a little bit more appealing, a little bit more attractive to either free agents or pending free agents on your own club, because, again, the production just simply hasn't been there to lure people to the Seahawks.
Last question here coming from Baudelaire's on Blue Sky. Who do you consider to have the most trade value if the Seahawks look to increase their draft stock? That would still be DK Metcalf, because he is still in the prime of his career. If you were going to make a move, I think you can maybe get a late first-round pick and an additional mid-round pick for DK Metcalf. I think there are still some teams out there that would look at his rare physical tools and his size and the fact that he's had multiple 1,000-yard seasons, he's been productive in the NFL. They would say, we can take him to that next level the Seahawks have not been able to. I think there are teams out there that would be more than happy to take a shot on that, knowing that he is going to need a big contract coming up soon as well. But he still has a year left on his deal. To me, that is the guy on this roster that offers the most trade value. You're certainly not going to be getting high picks back for Tyler Lockett or Ken Walker III or anybody like that. I think that DK Metcalf is clearly head and shoulders above everyone else. And the inconsistencies of Reek Woolen, you're not going to be fetching a huge draft pick for him if you decided to move him either. DK, to me, by a landslide on this one. When we come back, the Seahawks are out of the playoff hunt with one game left to go, but Week 18 still matters. We're going to tell you why coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Welcome back to the Locked On Seahawks podcast. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, here on our Monday episode by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. At 9-7, the Seahawks can get to a 10th win, but they cannot make the postseason. Eliminated last night with the Commanders and the Falcons game going in the wrong direction. Several other games that just didn't go how the Seahawks needed them to this weekend. They have been mathematically eliminated with the strength of victory tiebreaker. So the Rams are NFC West champions. The Seahawks will be at home for the playoffs. And you look at this upcoming rematch with the Rams, a game that could have had major implications. It could have been an NFC West title game, but that's not what we're going to see this weekend. The Rams are certainly going to be resting a lot of their players because they can't improve their situation too much. But Mike Macdonald was saying it today. The Seahawks are going to play this like a normal game. They are playing to win. And as I just mentioned, this is a chance to get to 10 wins. You talked about it earlier, and I know that this is not what most fans necessarily want to hear, but that chance to get double-digit victories, they haven't done it since 2020. To me, that's a silver lining. Yes, you missed the playoffs, but this was a top-heavy NFC this year with a ton of teams that won double-digit games, a lot of teams that were really bad too. To get to 10 wins in his first year as an NFL head coach, that still has a lot of value for Mike Macdonald, and that makes this game matter, even if it isn't significant in the playoff hunt.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously the Seahawks are out of the playoffs. So if that's all that motivates you, then I get it. You might as well just turn off the podcast right now. And I certainly don't want you to do that. As Corbin often says, thank you so very much to all of our viewers and listeners. But, it kind of angers me, to be honest with you, just the perception that a professional athlete is going to kind of mail this in. I mean, if you are an athlete of that caliber, then not only are you physically gifted, obviously, but you also have a work ethic that very few people in a civilian lifestyle can even possibly imagine. And so just the perception that they're just going to turn it off, then those aren't the kind of guys that John Schneider and Mike Macdonald want on the Seahawks in the first damn place. So I think that just kind of goes without saying. And as you said, Corbin, the that the double-digit victories would be huge. I mean, Pete Carroll, of course, led this team to a 9-8 record a year ago, and that was good enough to be above 500, but obviously also not good enough to get to the playoffs. That's exactly where Mike Macdonald is right now. At minimum, of course, he can get to that 10th win. Pete Carroll last year left Seattle with a 2-4 divisional record, got swept by the 49ers, got swept by the Rams. Mike Macdonald was hired to beat Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay specifically. He is 1-1 against Kyle Shanahan. He's 0-1 again, and it was a winnable game against the Rams. You mentioned before about the Giants game that just really should stick in the guts of Seahawks fans. So should the home loss to the Rams. You have the opportunity to avenge that with this game. If you do win, then you're going to be 4-2 in the division. Again, a year after going 2-4, you have wins over every other team in the division. Obviously swept the Cardinals as you did a year ago, but you know the way that the Cardinals played this past week against the Rams, the game that they had an opportunity to win, they just didn't show that they are a team that is ready to make that leap. But still, the Arizona Cardinals were in first place in the NFC West just a month and a half ago. The Seahawks were in first at one point. Obviously, the Rams, of course, finished. The 49ers are actually the team that's in the basement, and they were the team that everybody was concerned about. So, again, the NFC West is the most competitive division of football. To me, there is an awful lot of pride that is on the line against the LA Rams, and then just the fact that you're evaluating the coach, you're evaluating the players, so who's going to play. I'm fascinated to see who are going to be named the team captains for this football game. I was disappointed that Geno Smith nor DK Metcalf, to me, two of the players that the most on the line this past week, that neither of them were named team captains, and that critical was still a critical road game against the Chicago Bears on national television. Who are the players that are going to step up? To me, there is everything that's on the line. Obviously not the playoffs, but everything else about football, about competitiveness that matters to a first-year coach in a brand new program is still on the line Sunday against the LA Rams.
To me, the most fascinating storylines going into this game, yes, you can't go to the playoffs, but to me, it's a double-sided story at the quarterback position because Geno Smith, he hasn't been 100% healthy. We know he's said it publicly in press conferences that he is still dealing with a little bit with that knee that caused him to exit the loss to the Packers a few weeks back. So you wonder, is that going to be a situation where the Seahawks say, you know what, we don't want to put him out there and risk potentially injuring him worse. But at the same time, Geno Smith, with that contract, the team-friendly deal he signed a couple years ago, it's got a bunch of contract escalators, incentives on it, and he's still got 3 of them that he can get this year. Obviously, he's not going to get to 30 touchdown passes. He has 17. He is not going to get to that, but one of them is getting to 10 wins. The Seahawks can absolutely do that in this game. Second, he already is in position, if he didn't play in this game, that he would get the accuracy escalator. He's above 70% for completion rate, but he's got a chance to get that one. And he's 185 passing yards away from equaling his 2022 numbers in passing yards. If he hits that number and eclipses it, then he gets $2 million. He gets $2 million for all those. So you've got $6 million on the line for Geno Smith because of the contract, the team-friendly deal he signed. Look, he was willing to do that. The Seahawks have to let him get that opportunity to go out there and get that money. And on the other side of the coin, Sam Howell's got 1 year left in his contract after this year. You've gotten to see a little less than a half out of him. It was ugly against Green Bay, but you want to have an opportunity to evaluate him in a game where playoffs are not on the line. So I'm wondering how you balance that, because can you let Geno Smith attack through the air early? He gets 185 passing yards in the first half. Okay, Sam Howell, you're in now. Or is it Geno Smith the entire way? We're just going to do everything we can to win this game with the starters that we've got, and then we'll go into next year not really knowing what we have in Sam Howell moving forward. So I think it creates some dynamic storylines there at the quarterback position for what the Seahawks are going to do.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely a fascinating decision. As I said, I mean, I think that, the coaches are very much somebody that John Schneider and the rest of the Seahawks top brass, and then certainly the fan base, are going to be evaluating the decisions that they make. And I think you can make an argument for those out there who want to start Sam Howell and say, hey, let's see what the team has and how. Obviously, he showed very, very little in his one significant opportunity, of course, of the regular season, as you said. I mean, looked like a deer in the headlights against the Packers, but that was a very difficult situation to put him in. Maybe you give him this week to fully get into the game plan. He is the guy, and see what he can do against the Los Angeles Rams. They're the division champs, so let's see what you can do, against the division champs. That said, where I come back to, Corbin, is what I tried to mention before. It's just the idea that you were trying to build a program here with Mike Macdonald, and the idea of doing anything but trying to win this football game with every single ounce of your best talent. And I think that's clearly Geno Smith over Sam Howell. Then again, I expect Geno Smith to start the game. I expect him to finish the game. I do expect him to get the $2 million in escalators, as you mentioned, 186 passing yards he needs. He should get that. He should get the completion percentage. And if he does both of those things without throwing very many interceptions, I do think that the Seahawks are going to win that game. So as you said, he gets $6 million just for potentially just for playing in this football game, at least if he has any modicum of passing success. I think that there's some other individual numbers out there that are fascinating. Jackson Smith-Njigba obviously has ascended to the top of Seattle's receiving core. He's got 96 receptions. You'd love to see him get those 4 to break the century mark there. Zach Charbonnet has 510 rushing yards, Corbin. Zach Charbonnet is only 63 rushing yards behind Kenneth Walker III. I think that would have been a surprise to a lot of people if you had said that Zach Charbonnet would end the season as Seattle's leading rusher. So I think that that's a fascinating one here. There's some career high potential for guys like Michael Dixon, who has been an absolute all-pro caliber player for the Seahawks, but unfortunately doesn't get much attention. And then, of course, on the defensive side of the ball, I'm fascinated to see if Leonard Williams is able to kind of pad his statistics and be able to try to fan the flames a little bit more for possible defensive player of the year, when damn it, he deserves it. He's been phenomenal. So again, there's so many different reasons why I think that this game is absolutely massive. And if Sean McVay and the Los Angeles Rams don't want to play their stars because they're going to the postseason, I certainly understand it. The Seahawks will, and that's why they have a chance to, I think, to leave SoFi Stadium as the winners, or the victors over the NFC West champs.
Yeah, getting to 10 wins, it would obviously be it would be an important mark for Mike Macdonald, even if it's without a playoff berth. It would still show some improvement from the previous season. And so that would obviously be a big deal. And like anytime you're talking about a team that has nothing to play for in terms of playoffs, you're looking at the young players. You want to see how Tyrese Knight finishes off his rookie season, how Byron Murphy II finishes off his rookie season, Satoa Lamea at right guard, Oluwatimi, his first year where he gets extended starting reps at the center position, AJ Barner. I can keep listing them off, but those young players, these reps are incredibly invaluable, and you want those guys to be able to have a strong finish that they can carry into the offseason. Once you get back for OTAs, they can hit the ground running off that. And then you're hoping that a number of those guys are going to take big leaps as sophomores or juniors in Oluwatimi's case and be able to come out. And if those guys are a lot better, your football team's going to be better equipped to be able to win games like the Giants and Rams games that you were not able to get done this year. And maybe you end up getting 12, 13 wins next year with this football team. So those young guys' continued growth and having a strong finish, particularly from your rookie class, that is going to be something that I'm going to be watching very closely in this game, even if the playoffs are no longer something that's attainable for Seattle. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up on tomorrow's episode, we are going to have some Tell the Truth Tuesday takeaways, just looking back at the season as a whole. And we're going to take a look at the Rams, maybe look at some players that will play in this game that might not have if the NFC West was still up for grabs. Make sure that you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Monday night. Go Hawks.